over to me. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for everyone for joining. I'm so glad you could make it. This is at 2 years in August next month, so that'll be pretty cool. And tonight's talk should be really great. We have Lanette Kramer and John Bach. And so that's a great team of PMs. So enjoy and thank you.
Cool. Awesome. Thanks, Joe. So I'm John. I'm your host. I've been your host for what started as kind of a joke. I had led QA-SIG, sponsored by Quardev for many years as a Quardev employee, and left Quardev in 2011 to take the job at eBay, and then came back to the Seattle area and spoke at QA-SIG about how I had defected to be a PM and what that was like. And someone joked that I should start a PMSIG. And at first I laughed it off and said, yeah. And then I thought about that it would be nice to have a community of PMs. And I thought, well, there are product managers and there are project managers and there are program managers. And this PMSIG is for all three. And I got my definition of what product, project, and program is. I thought I would kick it off with Lanette here, who I've known for many years as a quality assurance professional, testing aficionado, a deep thinker back in the days on Twitter and building a test community there. And to learn that she's a program manager, not only a program manager, a technical program manager, and that's the theme of tonight's talk. So I'm pleased to interview friend and colleague Lanette Kramer, and I'll just jump right in. So you're a program manager, Lanette, with Media Alpha, and tell us a little bit about your role in Media Alpha and the program manager part versus the technical program manager part.
Okay, so first, Media Alpha is an insurtech. And what that means is they host a live auction that sends web ads, phone calls, and leads to insurers. And the insurer might be as small as like a one-person office, or as large as, say, your Geico and Progressive, where there's machine learning involved and a lot of things. But my role there, my first role as a technical program manager has been owning the integrations, and that happens after the auction. So when the auction's done, there's a winner, and there's data in the Media Alpha format, which has a schema and everything. And my role was to figure out what format each buyer had with their documentation, authenticate, create a plan, usually using Postman, to reach out and get all the information we need about their systems so we can send them information securely. Because things like personal information, you don't want to just send that, just plain over the internet. People would not appreciate it. So in order to do that, we would have integrations, and sometimes integrations would offer some cool things like being able to directly quote a bid if we had enough information. And then also they could send us their conversion data to make it easier to target which of their advertising platforms were performing in a way they wanted. But my piece was really data from point A, get it to go to point B successfully, and then support that integration over time.
Awesome. Okay, so how does that differ from what some might interpret that as product manager or even project manager?
So it's a program because integrations don't have a start and end, and they don't have a version. And part of my role was client facing and trying to make those clients have a great experience and make sure everything's in place for them. But part of it is also working to make it more efficient to create integrations in the future. So things like if we're seeing certain call software more often, we could try and centralize that code into a module and reuse it. There were some cases where we could make an integration without any engineering time because we had something that close that we could prove it out, test it, get the client verification, and have that ready to go. Oh, but as far as being a program and not a product, if it was focused on one particular product, if integrations were something we shipped, then I would probably be a product manager instead of a program manager.
Yeah, that aligns with my answer too. Is the product is a particular set of features that solve a material problem of some kind, and a project manager may be more administrivia around like the mechanics of how stuff gets done and by whom and by what. But a program could be a collection of projects and products, and you're across the silos and you're joining, aligning, and you're facilitating across a wider spectrum of things. So it sounds like what that is. And so for the people in the audience who are either product or project managers, now they get a sense of program and they go, oh, okay, that's how you're defining it. But now you come in and say, now you're program manager, but now there's technical program manager. And just in the few minutes that you've spoken, I get a sense. I hear postman, right? So yeah, getting post responses and HTML codes, and so if someone in the audience has been told or wants to be more technical, like they want to move into the TPM space, what's your general advice of what that might mean for them, how they can get started, or what might be an expectation of their manager or somebody, maybe they're going after a new job as a TPM?
One thing I've noticed is the definition varies so much from company to company, but I can only speak about my journey and what I would suggest to someone else. In my experience, a technical program manager must be able to read and understand the code enough to find out where code problems are. They maybe are not the best coder you've ever seen, but they can read and understand the code and work with the engineers to explain why something is a problem in a specific area. And program management to me is about what, and project management is about when and how much money. So when and how much money always matters. But I trust the people running projects on that. And I really stay focused on what are we building and why are we building?
Awesome. Okay, so here's a question. You're interviewing a TPM for a role that reports to you. What are you looking for in a TPM?
Well, I haven't got to hire anybody yet, and I think that my opinion would be different than maybe other people. I think it's wild if you just go through technical program management roles, how different. There are some people that if you haven't worked with the exact same hardware with the exact same thing, they'll say you're not qualified, like none of your experience in the past translates at all. So I don't know the best way to be hired, but I think if you understand programming and you can code in one or more languages, that's a great place to start. And that is going to help you not only do your job better, but understand some of the challenges with trying to do engineering when you don't have all the details. So it can guide you on making a list to check yourself. Am I providing someone building this enough information? So getting experience in building something, anything with client feedback is a great first step. If you want to, get more technical and get in there, literally build something yourself, because it makes it a lot easier to understand when requirements are complete and actionable versus when you're just gathering data and you don't have enough yet.
Yeah, good answer. Let me reframe the question this way. Let's say you are taking on a new role at Media Alpha and you need to fill your position and you have somebody, a TPM who's ready to go. What are one of the top few things that you'd want them to know about the importance of your role as a TPM?
So making sure that the work is flowing as expected and removing blockers would be the first thing. So the first thing I would want them to be able to do is to handle the reactive part. You know, part of the role is reactive. Clients call. I would want them, I would actually sit next to them and I would ask them, hey, this client is saying this. How would we find out if that's true or not? What do we need? So it's that thought process of understanding the system enough to support clients would be the very first thing, because we need to understand our clients to have any idea about what we're building and why. I would also want them to do some studying on their own and get up to the point they could draw this, how the data flows on the whiteboard and walk us through it. You know, what's happening here? When does it happen? And I would assume they would probably want to do that weekly until they're so good at it. It's just like child's play to them, because InsurTech is a pretty complicated space. And when you have auctions, you've got all kinds of location filters and you've got time and who's in the auction, who isn't. And there's a lot that can go wrong. And I know, John, you've worked with auctions. So sometimes figuring out who won an auction and why is not a simple question. But you need to be able to do that if people are asking you, how do I win more bids here? So
Yeah.
I think I would want them to understand all of that. But long term, there's also the part that's making things better. How do we take less engineering effort? How do we make our requirements better? How do we support new features with less risk? All of those things. So some of the things I would do are very tester-like. For example, making a release checklist, making sure we aren't breaking anything behind us, trying to make, upfront change the process so people get blocked less often. Things like that are also trying to improve things like the JIRA administration, so things are routed correctly. That's also an important part that a program manager should eventually know, but probably doesn't know on day one.
Yeah, what I'm listening for there's a model in my head that I've used about quality engineering versus program management. And in quality engineering, you're finding risks and problem in the product. And in program management, you're finding risks and problems in the project, in the program itself. A risk of somebody very important leaving and replacing that person. That's a risk. It's not affecting the quality, but it sounds like for a TPM role, that it's a little more fuzzy of risks in the product versus risks in the project, because you're getting into the mechanics of how things work. So could you help me understand that line between quality engineering and pointing out risks in the product itself versus risks in the project or projects itself?
I think that when you're a quality engineer, you're focused on making sure we're delivering the product with quality. So when you're going into requirements, you're looking, have we covered enough of the risks? Where you're looking at, are we missing any requirements if you're a program manager? And are we missing any interactions with other products that we have? So it's at a higher level. It's the same sort of thinking. It's the same kind of strategy. And there's always some questions you can answer and some questions you can't answer. And I think that's true in quality engineering and in program management. So sometimes the questions you get answered are not maybe the ones you'd prefer, but they're possible to
Right.
answer.
Right. All right.
We had a guy, so I worked with a guy at Media Alpha who we had a Halloween contest. There was a pumpkin-shaped container, and the contest was how many pieces of candy corn are in this pumpkin-shaped container. And we're not talking about a standard globe. He guessed within 2 pieces of candy. Okay, and I asked him, how did you do that? And he said,
Right.
math. You can measure it. There's an online description. And so that was our machine learning guy, and he was crazy. He could put a number to anything. And wow. if he so you get some people that you might be able to replace them, but the best they could do is pass on the most important knowledge and document things well enough for someone else to put their spin on it. But there are some specialists that are one of a kind that I've met through my career. So there's this thing, everyone's replaceable. Well, there is definitely a way to move forward, but not everyone's fully replaceable.
Yeah, that's a nice pivot to my next question. You almost set me up for this, and that there's kinds of technicality, kinds of ways people can be technical in the same role. And you did mention it's contextual. The TPM means different things to different places. Is there, what are some other kinds of technical proficiency that you've seen, even at Media Alpha, that may be different but equal to the kind of technician aptitude you bring to your role?
There are some people who, what they contribute is their extreme organization. And one thing I learned over the first year is the kindest thing you can do if you're a program manager is leave yourself good notes and have them be organized. And I find that stuff boring and I do not excel at it. But I learned really quickly, if I can't reorient myself as to what's the last thing that happened when I'm looking at a ticket, I can't do my job well. And that means the stuff that maybe was boring or trivial to me that I could work through from my memory, the kind of pace that a Media Alpha program manager works at, you can't do without good notes. So you're doing an unkindness to yourself if you're not organized, because it will bite you and it makes you less able to support the people who are relying on you if you aren't consistent. And so one thing I learned is be consistent and take the notes at the time, because you can't get behind and then catch up. It doesn't work. So there has to be a good method that works for how notes are taken in tickets so that it is possible to reorient yourself. And that they're all, not necessarily all in one place, but all at least linked in one ticket.
Yeah, that's one thought that you triggered was that more traditional, like non-technical, if you will, non-technical program managers are in a lot of meetings, and they take notes in meeting minutes and they follow up and they look for risks, right? They're listening for risks. Seems to me that a TPM would need traditionally a lot more think time to actually look at code, analyze code, become familiar with data flows. And that for many people means solitude. It means not having to be in meetings and is that true for you, that traditionally as a TPM you find that you need that extra like quiet time to like think and drill down into something technical?
I don't know, because I haven't been a non-technical PM. So I don't know. I mean, someone would have to tell me. Yeah. I would have, Media Alpha is not big on meetings. They say they have a flat structure and they really mean it. When I first was, it's grown about twice the size, like year over year and that kind of thing. So it has changed to some extent, but I was able to take time for thinking and just put my Slack status to, unless it's an emergency, please, I'm here, but not really, and then come back to it. And we kind of had clearly defined what an emergency constitutes, like the system down. So people kind of could get that time away. And I also appreciated that during the pandemic, we did our meetings remote. So that was an adjustment. But, I would say that everyone thinks they can multitask and they're good at it. I would try some days, but I don't think that was my best work. I think I do much better if I avoid fooling myself that I can multitask and have great results.
Yeah. Right. It's everybody's different, right? And it's extroverts and introverts, sometimes in the middle, being able to multitask and do administrative work like stuff in Jira, looking at status tickets, and so that pivots to my next question is the types of, you mentioned outputs. So the types of outputs as a TPM versus a traditional program manager, which are like roadmap, planning artifacts, making Jira tickets of releases and coordination of dependencies. With respect to your outputs, is it more like data diagrams and results of inefficient code? Give me an example of some of the outputs or artifacts you've created as a TPM that may be different than a traditional program manager.
So I would say some of the things I've created are trying to figure out what we can consolidate. So how many integrations have things in common versus are totally unique. Which ones we might be able to retire, trying to figure that out so we have less to maintain. Also, how many of the integrations did we complete and how did the releases go? And then I also had a list of things that had failed before to make sure that we were catching those up front. So trying to close those loops to make sure we're going in the right direction. Some of the artifacts would also be, I worked on a project that was an external customer and they were migrating all of their data to the Media Alpha platform. And what would happen with that is sometimes one of their engineers would tell me something was a super high priority, and then their CEO would come in and give a totally different take. And so eventually we ended up basically getting a shared spreadsheet. So priority had one source of truth. And they, had to figure out what their priority was as a business. And then making sure that that was running as they specified. And it's not just making Jira tickets, it's making sure things are getting completed on time and delivered to customers. And that also we gave them updates. And part of that would be in that particular role, working with account managers, and account managers are the people setting up clients. So having good estimates and being not missing your deadlines on a regular basis is important for supporting them because they're giving people a range of time when things should be done. So part of supporting them is not leaving them hanging and making sure all that stuff is tracked. So knowing what is supposed to be completed when and how are we doing on that, those kind of status updates, usually emails because they're time specific more than they are, specific to, lasting forever. So I'd say a lot of the role would be what's happened in the past week, past month, past quarter, past year, and not as descriptive of the program overall.
That's good. I listened for the notion of service. These artifacts, are they helping people in your program? And it caused a thought about this. If you is there merit to the common belief that technical people tend to be less social and more program management centered people tend to be the social ones and the service oriented? Or is it, as a TPM, do you find you're both? You have to be social and service oriented, and you also have to be technical and know that world.
I think you have to know that world and be able to look into things that you don't know and know who to ask if there's something that's outside of your technical realm. So understanding that it's your job to figure out the answers and learn how you can be sure those answers are correct. How can you check yourself? There's a lot of due diligence that you need to do before you, but you can still coordinate and collaborate with other people. And I've always been huge on collaboration and a very social person. So I don't know, but I still can code, but I can't do it with 3 people talking to me well. So, kind of figuring out how to balance that, I think, is one of the reasons why you see all these TPM roles with the hugest laundry list and they're not hiring anybody. It's a really hard job and I really love it because of the variety, but sometimes it feels like a hopeless task to do both the service oriented part and the technical part and to learn everything new all at the same time. But I do think that's what it's required to do a good job, is to be able to help both the engineers and the people that are client facing only, and sort of be a go-between and be able to switch between the lingos and be respectful, because people with business knowledge, it's not that they don't have knowledge, it's just a different kind of knowledge than technical people necessarily have.
Yeah, that's great. So you, as I mentioned in the beginning, you've been a quality engineer, quality related professional for many years. What's your relationship these days with quality engineers and quality assurance, the typical QA notion of that many people have in their head?
I still am a quality person and I always will be. I just also code and do this technical PM stuff. So there's never like this or that. I do all this stuff, and I absolutely have done a ton of testing as a technical PM, because a lot of testing your own assumptions is the same sort of thing as it is in testing, right? So if you have a client problem, those same methodologies that help you isolate a bug to the simplest steps, that's going to help you understand, how can I fix this with the least disruption? It's the same kind of process of elimination and proving out your hypothesis that every quality engineer does to report their best bug.
Yeah, you mentioned your relationship with like technical account managers and customers, and it's all about populating your notion of expectations of what do people expect that's going to happen when they do a particular kind of behavior with the product or the set of products. And so program managers often know this as requirements, right? And so do quality engineers, this notion of here's what's supposed to happen and here's what actually happens. And if they're different, that by definition is a problem. And it seems like that having a quality background, it makes you uniquely suited for the program management role in that respect, because it's all about requirements and expectations, and then figuring out to what degree are we meeting that, like you said, a successful release. And so is part of the role coming up with criteria of what makes something successful?
Yeah, I think it does. As far as when you're rating how well did this integration go and what could we have done different that would have made it better, or maybe smoother or more complete, or just even easier to maintain and build. All of those things are kind of that comparative. But one problem with coming from a quality background is you got to let other people do their job and not be out in the weeds with them all the time. And as a person prone to going out in the weeds, a lot of times looking around and saying, okay, my engineers have this, they know how to build stuff, I've given them the requirements, let them do it however they do it. If it meets the requirements, it's good. Like I sometimes, because you can read the code doesn't mean that's what you should be doing right then to help your team. So kind of drawing those lines, I think, is something that starts to get better with time. But it's also the same thing, I think, with managers that are very technical, trying to let go. So they're doing their job at the right level and other people have authority to do their job autonomously. So it's being of help without being like over their shoulder. It's how do you do that correctly, like making sure that they can reach you if there's a blockage, but not necessarily being so detailed. It's kind of, I think, there's counteracting or conflicting priorities in that case. I'm not sure I know the perfect sweet spot, and I think it's going to depend on when and how long has your team been doing this. I had one situation where the entire team was in the same office, and then the next quarter, my entire team was in Taiwan. And so I had to figure out, how am I going to help this team and unblock them in a different time zone? And there was a little bit of adjustment time. But I think in the long term, it was good because it allows cross training. And the kind of thing you said, like if one person leaves the company, we can't just fall apart. So I think it's good to inflict some of that pain up front so that everybody, we spread out the knowledge among teams.
Awesome. Did you see a change in your role pre-COVID and post-COVID?
The thing that was the hardest for me is when everyone was located together, I could tell when someone was starting to stress out, and so I could load balance visually. And part of that's just, or I could go over and say, hey, can you go see what's going on with this? I could help people out more quickly because I want the team to be happy. I want people to want to work on my team, right? I don't want engineers to say, hey, don't work on that team. It's going to be super stressful all the time. I want us to get our work done as pleasantly as we can. But people could really struggle and they wouldn't say anything. And I had to learn maybe to check in with them on a more casual basis, proactively more often. And I'm not perfect at that for sure. But I think we're all going to have to check in with each other proactively a little bit more, so we have that teamwork vibe that you have while working together.
Yeah, that's a nice segue, Lanette, to something that you shared with me just before the meeting that I'd like to play for the recording now, kind of a recording in a recording. This is a YouTube video that you said you made to be of service to your colleagues about their physical and mental health, checking in with them, as you say. So I'd like to play that, and I think it's 10 minutes, and then do a debrief and pivot back to how that relates to your work these days. So let me is that okay if I do that now?
Yes.
Okay. So
and
let me do this.
You can ask me anything about it too when it's over. Okay. So go ahead.
Okay. Let me share my screen. Let's see if this is going to work.
How you doing? When I ask, how you doing, you might be reminded of Joey from Friends and that's his famous pickup line. He asks people, how you doing? And I'm not suggesting that you use cheesy pickup lines on your colleagues at work. But I learned this year that your boss is more likely to impact your health than your doctor is. So considering that, why isn't anyone covering the basics to look out for mental and physical health changes during a global pandemic? So, how are you doing? 4 in 10 adults have reported symptoms of anxiety or depression during the COVID pandemic, up from 1 out of 10 during a normal year. Have you tried getting in to see a therapist? I thought I was feeling bad, somewhat bad mentally. But when I went to get help, the expense and difficulty of getting into therapy made me feel much worse. If it's difficult for those of us who have higher than average income and are very privileged, who is the system working for? Because it doesn't seem like it's working very well. Third, I wanted to tell my story about how you can go from being fine to not okay faster than you might imagine. And then fourth, your physical and mental health are tied together. If you experience a decline in one, you may also experience a decline in the other because they're tied together. So who gives a crap? I got to a point where my only thought when I would think about the upcoming quarter, the upcoming year, is I just don't want to do this anymore. And I did not feel okay. But what do we do when we're not okay? So in my case, I was able to go on medical leave, and I'm very glad that my company supported me in doing that, because I went from feeling a little bit tired and unwell to being unable to walk entirely and being numb from my armpits down. And I had a very hard time getting help. When you have a issue, whether it be a physical or a mental health issue, it's tricky to know who to disclose the problem to. Legally, companies are not supposed to be biased against those who have physical and mental health challenges, but the results may vary depending on what company you work for. And it can be tricky as far as knowing how much to disclose and when. I returned back from work and I was feeling physically some better, but mentally I still felt like I just did not care as much as I did before. And I was feeling like I still don't want to do this again. I was feeling like I was not okay mentally. And I was feeling also that if this is what my life was going to be like, I didn't know if I really wanted it anymore. But I discovered that my life and your life and health are worth more than your job. Also, your purpose here on earth is more than making money for someone else. You are not just a cash cow for others to rely on. I learned this past year to work while crying. So basically, I could work with no less efficiency, even though it was a little bit hard to see what was on the screen when crying. But this is not a skill I want anyone else to learn. It is not cool to have a job where you are crying regularly. You are not okay if that's the case. And you need to get some support so that you can be feeling more okay if that's the case. Small things helped me get to a better mental and physical health state. The first thing that helped is snuggling with my cats. And we all as humans need touch. But during the global pandemic, the small things like hugs and handshakes have even gone away due to safety. And the third thing, if you've tried to fix things and they're not getting better, you need to find a new job. And that is your responsibility. And it's scary and it's hard to find a new job. And you don't want to jump from the frying pan into the fire. And there's a lot of reasons why it's hard when you have a job that should be good, if it's not working for you, to actually leave. So have you asked your employees how they're doing? Because if you really listen and you hook them up with appropriate care, you might save their life. But what if I'm not sure how to help? What can you do? I like rubber ducks in programming because I think they're excellent tools and they have a long history of helping programmers by just talking out your problem. So I have a couple ducks. The average size duck is for normal programming problems, but I also have a tiny duck, and he's like if I can't find a missing semicolon or if I have a typo, something like that. But you can help and make sure that you're doing no harm with the guideline to just be better than a rubber duck. And by that, I mean actually care for the person, listen to them, and repeat what they told you back to them to help them hear what they're feeling, what they're saying. Don't change the topic to your experience, but literally listen to them and try your best to help them. Now, in addition to active listening, we have the GAD-7 for anxiety and the PHQ-9 for depression. And these are tests that are given by licensed therapists that basically are just about, are you experiencing symptoms of anxiety and depression? But if you don't have access to those tests, active listening is better than nothing. You can find these tests online for free at patient.info, and you can just take them and see if you are experiencing enough symptoms of anxiety and depression that it's recommended that you seek therapy for the situation. So I wanted to leave you with the checklist of things that may help. So first, ask the question, how are you doing? Then listen. Be the rubber duck. That means be an active listener. Don't interrupt. Reflect back what they're telling you. Don't change the topic to the experience you had, but listen to what they're telling you. If it's possible for you to do this, understand how your physical and mental health benefits work, how your insurance works. And this is so you can guide someone through it so they can actually get into therapy sooner. This may be an iterative process. You may be able to iteratively improve your mental health benefits or physical health benefits. And do not stop asking. We need to care more for one another during this pandemic because a lot of people are not doing okay. If you have any questions or you want to see my references for those items that had the small numbers in the superscript, feel free to email me at lanettekremer@gmail.com.
Awesome. So that, to me, the pivot to this notion of service, that's what you've done with this video, is as you're creating these artifacts and you're serving other people on your projects, you're also, it seems to me, you personally are on the lookout for signals that will not only help you serve others technically, professionally, but personally. And that's an important part of program management, I would think. Do you agree that that's like part of the job, is getting everybody's best?
Vital part of the job. And our physical and mental health impacts our work performance. And when at the time of that video, it was 4 out of 10, it's over half of us now having those symptoms. So, it's gotten worse, not better. And that's unfortunate, but I would much rather have somebody take some time to look after their health and return to feeling well than work through, literally not being able to walk, the kind of thing that happened with me. I'm doing great now, I can walk, but it was shocking how over a period of 2 weeks, I went from, just a little bit tired to doing that poorly. And I think that can happen with people. And we're not necessarily seeing our doctors as often because there's risk everywhere you go. It's, if you want to go to the hospital, now that's a risk too. So it's scary out there for people. So I do think looking out for the people on our team, that goes with any type of management. It doesn't matter what kind of a PM you are. We need to take care of people so that they can do their best work. But not just for that, but also because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah. I think as a program manager, though, technical or not, you're apt to see more people than perhaps other roles, just by the nature of this, the systemic nature of a program versus a project, or a program versus a product. So in your work, as you are the liaison between these other colleagues at work, and you do notice something out of the ordinary, or somebody who doesn't seem to be as optimal as you knew them to be before, what's your approach to kind of a gentle intervention to check in and ask, are you okay?
Well, I try to ask them multiple times, because you can ask at the wrong time. I also try and let people know that if I phrase it one way, how are you doing? And they just go, oh, fine. I try and give them some time and come back and say, how are you feeling? I'm not asking about your work. I'm asking about you. How are you? What's going on? How are you feeling? And I try and ask more questions. But ultimately, some people might just not want to disclose that to you or at all. And that's their right. So I'm not going to pry too much, but I
Yeah.
want to at least ask, because if I can help, I want to.
Yeah. Yeah, especially being a TPM, a lot of people do find it intricate, complex, difficult, stressful, high expectations. You have to be the traditional program manager plus the technical side, whatever that may mean, looking at code or doing data diagrams. Because, like you said, the job description's out there. They're asking for the purple unicorn, and oh, surprise, surprise, they're not finding it because they're like, why just get a PM when we can get a TPM? So look at Lanette, look at her resume. She's been coding for years. I just have her be a program manager and do all the dev work too that's necessary. And it could cause a lot of, well, in this new awareness of neurodiversity, for some people who operate differently in this role, it could be very stressful and it's very tricky to check in. So what I've done more to your point is say, this is really hard and you're not alone in being confused, because something confusing is actually happening and it's reasonable for anybody to be confused. And even if they're silent and they don't take the bait, to check in, right? I'll say, so I'll give you, I know I'm struggling with this. Can you help me with this? And I try to pivot where they can help me with maybe something that they know in 5 minutes that would take me 5 hours. And that's you talked earlier about the fungibility of talent, which there is and there isn't some degree of fungibility. But if I can get somebody who is exhibiting some cues of not feeling safe or feeling stressed and burned out, the way people picked up on my cues when I was burning out last year in my previous role, people called me out on it in a gentle way, and they, and I was glad for that. And they did it in these very subtle ways that it was professional, but it was kind, and it was empathic. And so I, as a program manager, I think you're uniquely suited to be at the right place at the right time across your landscape of your remit as a professional to see and or hear some of these cues. And it's what comes across a lot in your answers, Lanette, is that servant leadership kind of ethic, that you want to be helpful to others and sure, help the business and help customers, but it's the trading of information that's hopefully useful to people, that's important in the role.
I think that's the case for how Media Alpha runs their technical program management team, but I don't think it's the same on every team. One thing that I have been learning by talking to other people who are TPMs is their job is not the same as what my experience has been. So I think it might just be part of being newer, that I switched over in 2019 from primarily my career being in quality. I actually took a course in JavaScript to learn some more coding ability, and I got my certificate there from the University of Washington. And I recommend, if anyone seriously wants to code, get into a course. There's free courses now. There's free code camp. There's also courses. A lot of times your employer may have a benefit that you can use. That was the case with me, where it was a ton of hard work. And a lot of times there'd be 20 hours or more of homework for an evening class in a week. And I'm like, wow, that's a lot. But it's not easy to try and get a fundamental understanding of programming in 9 months. So there is going to be some extra work. I'm still glad that I did that. I feel like it's necessary to be a TPM, to be able to go into the code, just for the engineers just for you to have that experience of being an engineer. Do I think that everyone who's a TPM needs to be a great coder? No. But, having done some of it yourself, I think is definitely a reasonable lowest bar to start.
Yeah, great. All right, Shelley, I'm going to open up the floor to any questions that our audience might have. Is there anything in the queue that we can address?
Sure, yeah, let's open it up. I don't see any questions yet.
I'll just highlight a couple of things I really got out of this. I heard quite a few times during your talk, Lanette, is what and why. What are you building and why are you doing it? And I think that's so important for a PM. And I thought it was interesting that you said that you've never been a non-technical PM, because I come from the exact opposite side. I've never been a technical PM. I focus on user experience and user interface design. And, you know, how will people use and what will they gain from what the team is building? And so I leave it to the techs to take care of the technical side, but I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
You know, why are you doing it? And what are you building? And then to get back to the physical and mental health thing, because I thought that was an interesting video, an interesting guide. I was part of a business group, and you shared what's going on with your business, but you also shared, it was required that you share what's going on with your personal life, so people could help you out. But it really, really makes a difference to get some advice. And I liked what they said was to listen. It ties back to what we heard last week, or last month, I mean, is to listen, to understand, not to be heard. And I thought that was good advice. Anyway, thanks for sharing that video. And thank you for your talk. Thanks for your talk on that, as always.
Yes, that's great. Awesome. Yeah, I especially liked, Lanette, the rubber duck part, and just being able to talk to talk it out and to be more than the rubber duck, I think is good. It's just that empathic, even if it's the repeating back of what they said, like, okay, I hear you say X, and just that alone, just someone feeling heard is important. And to have that under a stressful environment, in this environment of now hybrid work environment, is really special. So admire that you did that video too, and now it's now a part of our video in this recording. So appreciate that. And again, just awesome answers to some of the questions that all of the questions that I had. I wrote a lot of notes, and I'll probably follow up with a LinkedIn chat about a couple of these things to double click on them, because they're so germane to my work at eBay as a program manager. So that being said, Shelley, if there's nothing else in the queue, we're all set. And I want to thank you again, Lanette and Joe, for your intro and outro, and that'll do it for this PMSIG.
Thank you, John, as always.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Lanette. We appreciate you.
Bye.
Awesome.
All right.
See you, everybody.
Have a great night.
See you next time.